It is here. So welcome everybody. I am Joe and I've got my hostess Abby with me today. And today we are going to be diving into analyzing creative finance deals. Today we are going to talk about some deals that we've currently made. I'm going to talk about what I'm looking at when we analyze these deals, and actually one I just got off the phone with on a closing call with one of our students. So today we're going to talk about these creative finance deals. So our team, we were just chatting about it before we had the record button. I think we have 8 under contract this month. Today's August 23rd. So being the 23rd of the month, we're having a pretty decent month. Our goal is always hit double digits. We do this in primarily Florida, but we do find deals everywhere. If you are interested in seeing one of our deals, because some of these we buy for ourselves and we can't buy all of them. So some we assign to other investors or sometimes homeowners. And you could go to Fave, F-A-V-E, favehomebuyers.com. So if you want to see some of these properties and you want to see some of the more pictures of the ones we're going to talk about today, they're all going to be on there. And these are, like I said, properties that are available. Now, some of these are already sold. They go quick when we have a property under contract. So when I'm analyzing creative finance deals, everybody bring a pen, paper, something to write on. Cool. If you don't, I'll give you a second. I'm going to drop some knowledge on what I'm looking at a deal. And I'm going to kind of talk about a conversation that I just had today with the seller. I'm going to move my mic a little bit better. Is that better? Can you hear me better now? Cool. So when I look at when I'm doing a creative finance deal, price is always important. I don't really pay much attention to the price as much. What's most important to me, and I know this sounds crazy, but is cash flow, right? What am I making on the deal? Number one, and what is it costing me to get into the deal? What is it costing me to get into the deal? By far is what's most important to me. So some of these deals that we're going to talk about today, I'm going to break down what we always talk about as our cost of acquisition. Okay. So when I'm talking to a seller and we make a deal, we need to add up what is my cost to getting into this deal, because what's a big factor is cash on cash, right? I'm not using a bank. I'm not using my credit. I'm not having to get financed at a lender to get this deal. I'm working with usually a homeowner or an investor who has a property they want to sell. So the first thing I'm looking at is, do I have to give the seller a down payment, right? What's my cost of me buying this deal? So number one, you're going to write down payment. And guys, if you don't have this, or you don't have a pen handy, we do have a cost of acquisition worksheet that we will drop in the group for you guys, that you could just have this and print it out, or just leave it on your computer or phone and take a screenshot and kind of just write this out, right? So when I'm talking to a seller, or maybe you're talking to somebody on my team and you're interested in buying one of our deals, and you say, well, what's my cost of acquisition? What's my cost to buy this deal? And this is one thing you're always going to want to look at when you're buying any real estate deal. So I will tell you, when I'm working on a creative finance deal, I want to look at what's my down payment to a seller. Am I buying it for what they owe? Do I have to give them a down payment? All right. So obviously closest down to zero as possible on that. I have to look at closing costs, right? When you're buying a creative finance deal, most of the time you're going to be paying your side of the closing costs, but you're also going to be paying the seller side of the closing costs too. And the reason for that is a lot of times sellers in these situations aren't walking away from the sale with a check. And if you expect your seller to show up to closing, having to write a check for closing costs out of their pocket, they're not going to come. Your odds of closing that deal go down tremendously. So part of you buying the deal is you're going to pay your half of the closing costs and you're going to pay their half too. Now, the challenge comes along with that is you have to be careful when you're saying that, right? Because transfer tax in places like Philadelphia are like 5%. You buy a $500,000 property there, you're looking at a pretty big bill. Some places like that, it's customary that it's split. However, if I'm buying the house from Abby and I say, Abby, I typically buy with no money down, and Abby says, okay. And then I go to add up the closing costs and it's going to cost me $20,000 to close that in closing costs. I can't expect Abby to come to the closing table with 10 grand, right? So I better find value in this deal to make that happen somewhere, right? So this is where cost of acquisition is huge. Now there are deals that we close in middle of Pennsylvania, even upstate New York, in the Midwest. I just closed one. I just got the HUD statement yesterday from Jenn And I think the closing costs were like $2,000 on a deal we just closed in Louisiana. So with that being the case, making sure when you're saying you're paying both sides of the closing costs, you at least have a rough idea of what those are in your area, but it's definitely crucial in making that deal happen. When you're doing a cash deal and we're wholesaling cash deals, or I'm paying cash, that does not mean they have to now pay all of the closing costs as the buyer. You might negotiate that, you might not, but the seller might be walking away from a check if you're just going to be paying cash for a property. But when you're buying a property on terms, once again, where a lot of our deals are no money down, I can't expect them to come up with money. So I hope you guys all understand that. So cost of acquisition, down payment, hopefully it's zero or pretty close to that, because I just said we typically buy with no money down. Closing costs, we're paying both sides of closing costs, right? What are their payments? Are their payments current or are they delinquent? Are they in the rear, right? Are they current on their payments? So if they're currently delinquent on their payments, you're going to have to come up with some money to get them current. Now, that's something you might have them going through a loan modification. Sometimes that's happening. So you have to pay attention to a few of those things. That's a whole other story. But now say I'm talking with the seller, their payment is $900 a month. They haven't made their payment in 6 months, right? I'm gonna have to come up with a couple grand there, $3-4 grand to get them current. I'm gonna have to come up with the closing costs. Now they need 10 grand down, right? If you take out your worksheet, I'm adding all these things up. And I'm seeing closing costs, 10 grand down. I gotta make up for $4 grand in payments. And then when I'm also gonna have to anticipate any repairs. Now, is this a turnkey house? A lot of these houses, guys, we buy are crystal clean turnkey. And I'm going to show you one of my examples in a minute. Turnkey, crystal clean house. Some of these houses need, the typical $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 and just paint. There's the typical $5,000 range that we've seen defined, which could be paint. Sometimes it's small landscaping. Sometimes it could be a cleaning, something small. But usually a lot of these houses, not all, but most of these houses are pretty nice houses in pretty nice neighborhoods. Some are gorgeous houses in beautiful neighborhoods, really, with these creative deals. So some of them, we can still make terms deals, guys, on fixer-uppers too. Just because somebody has a fixer-upper, that house that needs a lot of work, the handyman special, terms still work on those deals. And I actually like it on those deals a lot more when I'm doing a fix and flip because I don't have to pay for the house. That's a whole other story. But going back on topic, cost of acquisition. All right, now I'm looking at the cost of repairs. I'm going to add that there. Say I'm going to estimate it's $5,000. I'm going to figure out what an insurance policy is going to cost me. I'm going to figure out set aside 2 to 3 months worth of payments. If I have to maybe put in new tenants, maybe for us, if we're going to do a lease purchase and I'm going to put in a tenant buyer, those are the things I'm going to also build into my cost of acquisition. So when I tally all of these things up, and I say my total cost to buy this deal is $18,000. And if I have $18,000, that will take care of my insurance policy. They'll take care of all the stuff on the inside, the back payments, closing costs, giving them their down payment, and everything is all set. The lawn's cut, and that gives me 3 months of payments set aside where that gives me enough time to find my tenant or tenant buyer or whatever that's going to look like for you. Now you know your cost of the deal is $18,000. And that's the first thing I want to do is set that number aside. Right. Now, the second part of what I'm going to do is now I want to figure out what's the cash flow, right? I know it's going to cost me $18,000 to get into this deal, but now how much am I going to make per month? So what I'm going to look at is if I'm buying the property with creative financing, like a subject to, where I'm taking over for their debt, or I'm going to buy it with seller financing, either one, what I need to do is I always want to make sure, the first thing I do is I want to check to see the taxes. I want to see what it's assessed for. And I want to see what the yearly taxes are on that. Then I want to see what my purchase price is going to be. Because what I've known from my experience, and I can tell you how I know, I've had this happen to me. I buy the house on terms for a much higher price than they bought it for, own the property for years. The town comes back and says, well, every 4 years or whatever it is, we do a reassessment of the property. And I see that it was sold for this much more and they raise your taxes. Now your taxes go up and that's going to cut into what you thought was your cash flow. Number one, you have to look to see if there's any homestead tax breaks that they're receiving, right? So maybe somebody's living there as their primary residence and then you buy it as your LLC or whatever it is, and they now lose that homestead. In upstate New York, it was called a star exemption. Every state has their own term or name for it, but generally, if it's your primary residence, the towns will give you a little bit of a tax break, right? Versus it being owned under for a LLC as a rental. So with that being the case, do you lose that now? So for in upstate New York, it's about $700-800 we would get discount on our taxes. So once again, if the taxes paid every year were X, and now it's no longer going to be homestead, and that's going to go up, I have to anticipate that, right? Because that's going to eat into my cash flow. And then if they reassess it, I also have to look at that too. That's one thing they don't really talk about as much as they should, because that's a real thing that happens. And I had one case study where I know of another investor. Sometimes the best lessons to learn are from other people's mistakes. But I had one investor who bought a couple of properties in South Carolina. And once those properties were no longer homestead, he went from cash flowing several hundred per month to losing several hundred per month on, I think, like 5 properties. And when you were banking on making $400 a door on 5 properties net, and you're actually losing $2,000 a month net, right? That gets real ugly and gets real old fast. That's a $50,000 swing basically, right? You're thinking of profiting 24 and you're actually losing 24. It's terrible. So this is where you really want to be in, anticipate what those taxes are going to be. So the next thing I'm going to look at is, what's my payment? What will the new taxes be? And what are they currently? What insurance policy do I have? And then I'm going to currently look for the rents. The first thing I do is, when I call underwriting a deal, is what you're going to call it, I need to figure out all the numbers here. So I need to figure out what this house first and foremost will rent for. Regardless if your actual strategy is going to be an Airbnb, or if it's going to be, short-term to nurses, traveling nurses and things like that, because I know you could get a lot more there. There's a lot of series of other government programs you can rent them houses. But first and foremost, I want to underwrite this if I'm going to rent this house. So I need to make sure that if all goes wrong and Airbnb stops letting things happen in this area, my exit strategy is a rental. So I need to make sure that I'm setting aside enough room to cash flow on a property. I'm also going to set aside whatever my rent is, about 8 to 10% for management fees if I'm going to have a management there, right? I'm also going to set aside another 10 to 15% for your CapEx, which is basically all your maintenance and repairs and upgrades and things like that. When you have to replace a hot water tank and things like that, you'll set aside a separate bank account for that. So when you're actually starting to take that out of your rent, what are you netting when you're all said and done? Right. So if we buy a property, I'm going to go over a couple of situations that we've done. But if I buy a property and my payment's $800 a month, and I know I could rent it for $1,500, but I'm taking out 10% for management fees, now I'm down to $1,350. I take another, say, 15% for my CapEx, and now I'm down to $1,200 and some change. I know I could still cash flow, $400 in that deal. That's a deal we're making. But what's my cost of acquisition to cash flow $400 a month? Maybe it was at $18,000. When I look at my $400 a month times 12 months out of a year, and I realize I'm making almost $5,000 a year, and I had $18,000 out of pocket to do that, that's a winner for me. We're making that deal happen, right? So the one exit strategy that I love the most, and that's why I asked to put where you're from, because the only state you can't do it is in Texas, but you could do a lease option or a lease purchase that we do with tenant buyers, where we actually work with folks. They get screened, so we're not just putting anybody in the house. They have to qualify, make the income and things like that. Even if their credit's banged up, that's okay. I've got one right now applying for one of our properties. Guys, he's a 460 credit score. And anybody's like, why would you put anybody into a house that's a 460 credit score? Well, my previous job, I was a finance manager at a car dealership. I did it for 20 years. I know credit reports. I've pulled tens of thousands of them. So when I look at somebody's credit report, and he's a 460 credit score, but all he has is a couple medical bills and a few small credit cards he just did not pay well, and they got charged off. No debt. Just lack of credit, and a little bit of credit he did have, bad. But it was for hundreds of dollars, not even thousands. And then I've known some people who have a 680 credit score, who every credit card they have is maxed out. They got the high car payment, the high house payment. They're up to their ears in debt, and their credit score is a 680. And if one little slip up goes wrong in their life, boy, they can't miss 1 week of work, or if not, the whole house of cards comes tumbling down on them. Where the other folks who's a 460 credit doesn't have any debt. He just has a bunch of credit cards, like 3 of them, they had like $500 limits. Like he racked up $500 going to who knows where, didn't pay them. Now he owes them like $700 because there's all these late fees tacked on, and they put it to a collection account. And he's got like 3 of those. And then there's like 3 medical bills he didn't pay for like $200. And that's a 460 credit score because he's never had a revolving credit. He's never had a credit card in good standing. He's never had a mortgage. So can we get him straightened out in a couple of years? Sure can. Now I'd rather work with somebody like that who has a good income, stable income, with room to improve in a couple of years versus somebody who has $80,000 in credit card debt and is living check to check. And I have to depend on them clearing that up in a couple of years. It's a lot harder. So in these situations, when I'm doing a lease purchase, I don't mind working with a 460 if it's the right 460. And there's also, a tough 680 credit score too. So just kind of that consideration. But one of our extra strategies is a lease purchase where we will sell it to a tenant buyer. We do get good down payments. It's in this property, I think it's like $10,000 to $12,000 they're going to give us down. So if I had to shell out $18,000 to get that property, but I got $12,000 back from my tenant buyer, I'm really only out $6,000. And I'm going to rent to them for as long as they're going to need in order to get a mortgage. And if I'm still going to cash flow that $400 a month, I'm even in about a year. And where I'm even faster than that is I don't pay the 10% for management. And I don't pay the 15% for CapEx because they're responsible for the maintenance, the repairs, the utilities, and there's no management fees because they're responsible for all that stuff too. They just pay rent online every month. So therefore we could cash flow really well in those situations, a lot better than most. So we might have a different exit strategy that might work differently, right? So this is where I ask, what is your exit strategy when you get into one of these deals? But I always first and foremost check for a rental, and then I'm going to look for alternative strategies. Rather, it could be an Airbnb where I could cash flow a lot more if that's your thing. Now, I don't run an Airbnb because that's a separate business, but I know a lot of folks who that's what they do. So sometimes I might find a property where it's a decent rental. It would crush it for an Airbnb, and it's in an area where I know somebody Airbnb is like crazy over there. That's their sweet spot, their honey holes, my wife likes to call them. And that's just not where we typically buy. And if I find that deal, I'm going to reach out to you and say, hey, Nancy, Trace, everybody in here, like, I got a deal. This is right in your backyard where you typically like to buy. And this is a great cash flowing deal. And it makes it happen. So I'm going to go over a deal that we have right now that is actually, I don't think it's available anymore. Like we just got it. That's the one in Winter Haven, Florida. So the address, we have it under contract. If you guys want to pull it up, it's 797 10th Street Northeast, Winter Haven, Florida. If you want to save all of that, you can go to favehomebuyers.com. That's right on our website. So you can check the deal. I'm going to go over this situation, what happened here. So the seller, Will, is a fantastic guy. He's in a situation where his company is based in Florida, in Miami. And I talked to him personally. He really wanted to live in Miami, but the cost of real estate was crazy there. And every time he tried to buy a house, they could never get it. He works from home. So he says, you know what, let me look at something a little bit closer to Orlando. So he finds this house and he buys it. He buys the deal. He closes on it in May this year. He buys it for $555. He rolls in the closing costs. He owes like $563. Now on this deal, shortly after he closes on it, because he works remote, he could work from anywhere. His son gets accepted to a school in Texas, and they want to move to Texas. He's literally only had the property for a few months. So everybody knows the market when you buy in March, April, and then close in May is different than it is right now this year. Can we all agree? Like the market is not like it was in April. It's definitely pulled back. So when he buys it and rolls in closing costs and everything and owes the full amount, which is over 100% loan to value, because when you get a VA loan, you can do it no money down and roll in closing costs. So they appraise it at $550. He bought it for $555, and then he rolls in his $8,000 in closing costs, and here we are. So he reaches out. We explained to him that he says, I don't need to sell this house. I already found my next house. We closed September. I can't afford 2 payments. So I said, we could buy seller finance sub 2. I'll take it over for what you all want it. And he says, sounds good. Let's go. All of a sudden, he disappears. happens often in our business. We follow up with them. We find out, Will says, I'm going to test it with the market. I've got a realtor who says she could sell it for $585. Once we explained if they do sell it for $585 and you pay a 6% commission and some closing costs, you're still going to have to write a check for thousands of dollars to say goodbye to this house. That's if it sells at $585. But you know what? I don't blame you for trying. If it doesn't work out, please let us know. Was it a week, Abby? He reached out to us. And it was, hey, you guys were right. We listed at $585. Nobody even came and looked at the house. So what happened was now he's interested in seller financing. We write up that deal on a seller finance that we're taking it over for what he owes, which is the $563. I think he's only made a couple of payments. We'll pay the closing costs. We'll close when he's ready. Now, guys, if you look at this house, so many people say to us, Joe, Jen, team, why would somebody sell you a 6-bedroom, 4-bathroom, 3,000 square foot house that's turnkey that this guy just bought 2-3 months ago? Why would that make sense for anybody, right? We write it up in a 29-year term, no money down. It's really one of these situations where we call keys for closing costs, where he hands us the keys and we cover all the closing costs and we're into a deal. So how do I now, as a potential homeowner, maybe I'm looking for a house for me and my family to move into. Now, and I did show my wife, it's too far from the beach. I said that, not her. But she would agree because it's closer to Orlando. It's about an hour drive from the beach. But here's the deal on this one, guys. He's got a 4.6% interest rate. I could move my family into this house. It is beautiful. It's turnkey, right? It's got a beautiful pool across the street from a park that has a lake view out the front of the house. So when you stand in the front yard, you see this beautiful lake with nothing else in your way besides a small little park. Your backyard, you've got this gorgeous pool, and you're in a 6-bedroom, 3,000 square foot house, 45 minutes outside of Orlando, probably about an hour from the Tampa Beach area, Clearwater area. So great location, great house. If I wanted to move in here, this would cost me about $7,000 to $8,000 in closing costs and my insurance policy, and I own a house now in Florida, right? And I just take over his payments for 29 years. I would never have to qualify for a mortgage ever again, and I can own a house. So this is why this really, really works well for our seller, because he says, I found my forever house. We're good to go. I'm already approved for that. I don't need to have this thing sold in order to buy my next house. There's no proceeds coming from that sale to go to my next house. So I'm good there. I just can't afford 2 payments. And this thing is just sitting there and it's sitting on the market and it's not selling. So what does our seller need here? He needs a quick sale and he needs somebody debt relief. He needs somebody to take over his payments that he's going to be stuck into for a while, because unfortunately he signed a 30-year mortgage at the little top peak of the market. I think probably March was the absolute peak of this real estate market. And then since then, I think it's been trickling down since. Now, will it go past that? I'm sure it's going to down the road, but for some short time, it's not going to. So as that's the case, here's a win for our seller. Here's a win for us. Now, what are we going to do with this house? What's our exit strategy? We can move into it as a family, say, honey, we're home. I could put this into one of my company's names and turn this into a rental. I could turn this into an Airbnb. I can turn this into a sale to somebody who wants to move into it as their own house. A lot of people are relocating from other parts of the country to Florida. About 1,000 people a day are moving to the state. So maybe if you sold your house in Illinois and you want to move down here and the market's tough and you haven't found the right house, here's a situation where you're self-employed. Here's a great situation. You get into a house and own something, right? So the neat thing about what we do on our team is we don't make anybody into this house. Like, we have to verify that information. We have a very, very extensive shakedown process to make sure that if we're going to assign this deal to another investor, they're a very seasoned investor. They know what they're doing. If we're going to turn this deal into where Mr. or Mrs. or whomever homeowner are going to buy this, we are going to run on them what's called an RMLO, which is it's a loan mortgage loan originator, and they're going to run it as if they were qualifying them through a bank, and they're going to get all the pay stubs and make sure all the back end is all corrected. They're going to actually qualify for this. Maybe not right now, but eventually their debt to income is in line, that they could afford these payments, that their income all checks out. and that you're not putting somebody for a situation. I'll give you an example. Somebody sells their house, they get a chunk of money. They want to put that down towards their future home, but they're not going to be able to afford the monthly payment. Then it's for nothing, right? So we want to make sure we don't put people in these bad situations. And we want to make sure that they're able to afford this house for their sake and for the seller's sake. However, we do let the seller know for any reason, if it doesn't work out, please get in touch with us. We'll make sure that we get involved and handle the situation. We'll put in another buyer for them. They're not on their own. So if that ever happens, not the end of the world, but you plan for if it does, what is our next steps, right? But we definitely have a good shakedown process to make sure they're a good fit. So analyzing creative finance deals, we're going to get back into that, but here's just a situation. The next one we're going to do is I'm going to talk about a student I just got off the closing call with an hour ago. So my student is based in Austin, Texas. Hi, Melanie. Should be watching this in the replay. She's in a meeting right now. But either way, we had a closing call. She found a property in Dallas, Texas. Nice house, beautiful neighborhood. Definitely a good purchase. It's a duplex. It's for sale. The seller was open to terms. So Melanie did a great job of collecting the information. The seller will sell for $475. She said she wanted 10% down. And she said, I saw online that 7% was reasonable for seller financing. She said she's currently renting each side for $1,400 a month. But she said, these aren't folks that, their leases are up in a few months. And I said, would they like to stay? She's like, yeah, but they're probably not gonna be the best fit for you guys. Plus you're gonna be able to raise the rents, and these places need a little bit of work. They need some updating. So the reason why I haven't done the updating is because I haven't got a lot of access to the property because my tenants have been less than cooperative. So I said, gotcha. So long story short, she's charging $1,400 a month for rent, but we're finding it could go probably closer to $1,800 a month for rent, maybe potentially higher. We're doing a little research on that right now. So first thing I did was, before we got on the call, I ran the seller's numbers. Now, when I ran the seller's numbers, this did not make sense. So at a $475 price, at 10% down, at a 7% interest rate, that's giving me a $2,844 payment before I add in the taxes and insurance. I also look, if I'm buying it for $475 and I see that she bought it for 100 and something thousand, I could pull it up real quick. She bought it for $173 and 14. She's going to have a big capital gains check coming, right? So she wants to avoid that, the sale of that. So when we started chatting about this, she's owned it for just almost 8 years. PropStream shows it's worth $573. The comps that we're pulling are all showing probably 600 plus. So at $475, I think it's a pretty good deal. She was originally asking $550 for it. Mel did a great job of negotiating her down. This is a hot area. So once I started chatting with the seller, what I explained to her is that we buy the property as is. And my biggest thing was, I'm looking at the price, but what I'm thinking you're asking for it is definitely in the range for what we're looking to pay for it. I asked her if she has any flexibility in the price, and she says, I may, depending on the rest of the terms. I said, great. I'm fine, I think, for what you're asking for it. And I think I could stretch to pay your $475 price. My biggest concern, Mrs. Seller, is my monthly payment, because I'm going to be paying you per month. You're going to be a bank. You're no longer going to be dealing with the tenants and the toilets and the stories and the not collecting rent and all the other stuff. That'll be me. I'll be paying you per month. I'll also be paying your taxes. I'll be paying the insurance. I'll be taking care of any maintenance, all of the repairs, and then obviously all the upgrades. And I said, if we could agree on a deal, I'll pay my half of the closing costs and I'll pay your half too. So there's no fees out of pocket. So she says, yeah, I love the sound of this. I said, so my challenge is this, is that the terms that you originally talked about, that doesn't really make much sense because my payment's going to be too high. And I said, on a situation where this might work well, I was like, a lot of times folks look at interest because that's important to them. I was like, but if I pay you interest, you got to pay taxes on that interest. And a lot of times folks aren't looking to pay more in taxes. So here's a situation that might work well for you and might work well for us. If I were to stretch and pay $475 for your property, say I were to not pay 7%, say we're to pay something closer to 3%, because we just did a deal like that the other day. That payment to you would be $1,800 per month is what I would pay for that to you per month. And I pay the tax and insurance on top of that. And she said, okay. And this is before I even try to get into the price of the house. So when I start getting into the fact is that we typically buy with no money down, because I explained to her that because we buy with no money down, we're going to pay your closing costs and we're going to do some upgrades to the property. She said, that's fine. I could do that. I think I have a little bit wiggle room on the price then. We talked about a term. So this is where everybody gets really scared. And I always tell everybody, please, 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 like here, I'll stop, like write this down, make a big asterisk if you're taking notes. Don't ever prejudge a seller. When you're in sales, I've been in sales my whole life. Happens to me, happens to every person in sales. You're prejudging the person in front of you. You're prejudging what you think they're going to do based on the thoughts in your head, not based on any facts that you have or any thoughts in their head. The seller's 70 years old. So when you're talking to a seller who owns this property free and clear and they're selling to you for almost $500,000, everybody assumes they're going to want their payment paid off real quick, right? Because why? Because they're 70. But I always stick by my training and always just go by what I was taught and don't vary from that. So I say, well, Mrs. Seller, if I pay you that $1,800 a month, some folks love getting that payment every single month because they can rely on it without having to deal with the tenants, the toilets, house is sold out of their hair. They're just collecting that, $1,800, $2,000 payment, whatever that was per month. And they'll give me 20, 30 years to get them cashed out. And then I work with some folks who might want some of that equity a little sooner, and they'll give me like 10 to 15 years to get them cashed out. So Mrs. Seller, if I were to buy your house and stretch that $475 and pay it as is and pay that $1,800 to $2,000 per month to you, what's the most amount of time you give me? And the first thing that goes off in my head, I'm not going to lie, just like everybody else, they assume she's going to say 5 years, 10 years, whatever. She's like, I think I could do 30 years because I'm passing this down to my children anyway, so it doesn't really matter to me. And it was like, mission accomplished, right? Mission accomplished. So she likes the payment. She's down for 30 years term to get her cashed out. Next thing we have to do now is put this in writing. I told her the next step, what we're going to do is we're going to put this in writing. And if it's everything that we talked about, you give it the okay. And if you give it the okay, I have 21 days due diligence to get some contractors, some partners of mine, investor friends, and we're going to do a walkthrough. I just want to make sure there's no other issues with the property that we didn't know about. And if everything looks good, good news is our attorney's right in town. We should be able to close this deal in a couple of weeks. She says, sounds great to me. Let me talk to my whomever it was, and we're going to reconvene in a couple of days, but she sounds like she's super happy with what's going on. So with that being the case, guys, this lead came from Zillow. This was a for sale by owner lead in a hot market, in a hot area of a hot market, which is Dallas, Texas, which is in the hot area of Dallas, Texas. So it's not like this was like some podunk place where like nobody buys and sells real estate. It wasn't like, this was just right on Zillow for sale online, right? But we talked to the seller. She said she was open to terms. Our student did a great job of preliminary finding out somewhat of what that looked like, collecting the information. We got our weekly coaching call, which I do with her every week this time, 1 o'clock. And then we called the seller together, worked out that deal. And the next step is now the follow-up process and getting under contract. So she did a great job of working with the seller, finding out what the issue was and how we're able to help her. She's able to get full price for her house. And here, this is a win for the seller. I said, if you're going to sell this for $475, you're going to get charged quite a bit of income tax on that deal, right? If I buy it from you for $475 and I pay you 3% interest over 30 years, you're going to net for that property almost $7,000 or $700,000. So if you're looking to make the most amount of money on this transaction and pay the least amount of taxes, this is the best of both worlds, because if you make a cash sale, you're getting taxed on that one lump. And I was like, and if you want to be able to defer how much you're paying in taxes, a lot of folks like yourself love this way because you're only getting taxed on the amount of payments that we're paying you per year. So that's going to be a lot better for your tax bracket and what you're trying to do. And she said, I know, this is exactly why I love this idea. I was like, oh, right. So like, does somebody like in the heart of like one of the hottest markets in the country say that kind of stuff? Yeah, they do. So don't prejudge like, hey, that doesn't work in this area because this area is too hot. Don't prejudge that a seller won't sell to you for a 30 or 40-year term because maybe they're a little bit older. Don't prejudge any of these thoughts. We create a process, we stick to the process, we collect the information, and we make the best decisions possible, right? From the information that we collect. And this is why what I've learned from Ron the Grand, my teacher, was when negotiating, most times people want to negotiate by giving offers, by giving information. He says, but expert negotiators, they ask great questions, they receive the information, and they have the seller present them the offer. And that's one of the things, if I would say, Abby, that we try to work on the most with our team is we don't put out the offers, we collect the information, we ask the right questions at the right time. And because of that, we have the sellers present us the offers. And that's the key, I really think, to making a lot of our deals. That's why this month we have 8 deals under contract. And it's just because of that. I can't think of one of these deals where I would say to them, like, I need to pay this much for your house. Because in a lot of these situations, the seller says, I'll sell it to you for what I owe if you take over my payments. I just want to walk away, right? This lady here, she says, I'll pay, or she wants $475 for her property. I think she's in the range for it. I don't have to say I'm going to pay you $400. Give her some lowball cash offer if I can make sense on the rest of the deal. And this is where we have to plug in our data to see, because I think that rent, we might even get closer to $2,000 aside. And if that's the case, it's looking pretty darn good. So long story short, it's not always the price. And the one thing that I did tell, and I stole this part from Pace Morby, I'm not going to lie, but the one thing I did tell Sheila during our call today was, I'm really not as concerned about the price for your house as I am concerned about what I have to pay for you per month. And I'll be an example. I could pay you $1 million for this house. I really can. If I could pay you $1 per month for 1 million months, because then I know I can put in taxes and insurance and I could still make money on that deal. So I could even pay you $1 million for this property if I could pay you $1 per month. So that's where it makes sense. And when I said that to her, she's like, I got it. Aha. So for her, she understood this. We could keep that payment nice and low, and she's no longer responsible for any of the stuff. This is a win for her. And when I'm thinking in the back of my head, she's collecting $2,800 a month per each side, but is she even collecting all of it? Is she having to deal with all the stuff to even do that? Like, what's that experience like for her, right? So these are why we're able to put these kind of deals together. And it's really listening to the seller and their situation. And does it work for everybody? No, it doesn't. And if it doesn't work for a terms deal, we're always going to ask, what is their cash offer? What is the best they could do for cash? And we put that number together. And if it looks like we're close to a cash deal, then at that point, we would have to have a conversation with the seller, what range we need to be in order to make that work if we collected it. 2 more days from now, I'm going to be on a seller call here in Florida, where I'm going to go to somebody's house and we're going to talk about it. But when we're doing creative finance deals, for me, it's not always about the price. And I have a lot of times if a seller feels like they got a good number for their property, they feel like they got their win. And they did. They got their number. And if I could get that as a no money down or a really low cost of acquisition, a really low monthly payment that I could cash a lot of it for a long term, I'm not talking a 5-year term, I'm talking 10 years plus, then I feel like I won. And in any real estate transaction, if a buyer and seller go opposite direction after the deal's over and they both feel good and they both feel like they won, like that's how you're going to make deals happen, guys. So these are some of the things that we've really worked on in our team with our acquisition process of collecting information of leads that come into us, asking them the right questions. And for us, it's 1 out of 75 incoming leads turns into a deal. So I think 1 out of 75 leads come in, about 8 to 10 of those turn into a closing call with one of my closing managers. And then out of that, we usually get a deal. And then the rest go into a follow-up system. And then down the road, they turn in. Especially now, we're having a lot of folks say, hey, I talked to you a few months ago and I'm definitely considering selling now. And I think it's because we're seeing the change in the market. So what's going to happen if you're a cash investor and you're talking to people already, the one thing I always say is, hey, if I could pay, a little bit more for your property, would you be open to seller finance? You know, if you don't have the right script yet, right? If you don't have all the information, I think we have it on our website for sale for like not very expensive, like our own script, the one that our own team uses every single time. Do we, Abby?
Yeah,
So,
I think so.
Yeah, I think it's right on there. If you want to drop a link for the website, you guys can check out the one that we use if you're ever interested. This is the one that we designed. We wrote this in-house. This is not something we use from somebody else. And the reason why is because when I started in training for this stuff a decade ago, I would look at different scripts, and I'll be honest with you, they look like a busy roadmap with way too many questions, way too much information, and it was way too much. I did sales my whole life, and I really was a very big proponent of the straight line approach where you ask a series of questions, collect information. So this really flowed well with what I was doing. And my wife and I, after trial and error and seeing what was working and wasn't working, and we've also revamped it a number of times ourselves with Abby and our whole team, but we've designed this script, and this is the same script that we stick to every time. And Abby could tell you that we're sticklers on it to the point where we even have testing, and you have to be certified to even work for us. You got to pass your script test, and Abby is the controller, so she'll let me know if you fail or if you pass. Because if you don't pass, you don't get on the sales floor. But we are that big on it, and it's really, we do all of ours. It's a lot different than most, so I don't say this would work for you, but it's been working really well for us. Is when somebody reaches out to us, they do it usually through Facebook messaging and stuff like that. And when we do receive that, we do most of ours right through messaging. We only get on the phone calls with people who sound like they need to talk to somebody. Rather, there's sense of motivation. There's some sense of pain. There is obviously, if they said yes to our questions, we definitely want to get on the phone with those folks. A lot of the folks who are like, hey, I just want to see what my house is worth. You know, if the market's hot, they want top dollar and they need all cash now. We spend a lot of time with time wasters who have no intention of selling you a house ever, and spent half of my day or hours doing that we kind of made a filtration system with our script to kind of get on the phone with the right people. There might be a couple that slip through the cracks that we get on with that are time wasters. There might be a couple that if we talk to every one of them, we could have found an extra deal here or there, but we really want to spend the majority of the time talking to people who really wanted to sell their house. And there's so many folks out there that really are in a situation. And some of the stuff gets really, heartbreaking if you listen to enough of the stories, but there's a lot of people out there who are in situations who are really in a jam. And if you're able to talk to them and get to the right folks who really need your help, those deals come together very easily and you're able to help somebody out. We just did one in Louisiana, guys. It's the one we just closed on. I'll give you the address. If you go to Fave Home Buyers, it's on there too. We offered it out to the public and nobody took it, so we did. Where is that one? Here it is. It's 8401 Woodlands Trail, Greenwood, Louisiana. 8401 Woodlands Trail. Woodlands is one word. Trail, Greenwood, Louisiana. So seller reaches out to us. They're willing to sell for what they owe if we're giving them $7,000 down, because they need money to move. They found a new place. It's a double wide, like 2,000 square foot, 4-bedroom. We goofed up. It's not 2,100 square feet. It's like 2,600 square feet. We didn't have the right information on our website, but Zillow was all correct. Nonetheless, we were going to dispo this thing out. The seller's payment was like $500 a month. Rent was like close to $1,200 a month. You just had to really do a clean out, do some small patchwork. It was built in 2006, I believe, so it wasn't terribly old. Comp, all completed, was around 130. We had it under contract for 70,000, $7,000 down, $63,000 bank balance. We take over a $500 payment. So I was going to assign this because I typically don't buy double wides in Greenwood, Louisiana. So I figured maybe we're going to find an investor who wants to rent in that area. And so we put it on our website. Our dispo team tried and says, well, it's kind of a little bit of a rural area. I'm having a hard time finding an investor who wants to buy something there. So I said, no problem. These folks who are in there need help. They can't afford their payment anymore, $500 a month. So we made 2 mortgage payments while they were still living there. We tell them we're going to buy the deal. So I'm going to buy the deal sub 2. I'm going to write him a check for $7,000. I'm going to pay the closing costs. I'm going to now own a property in Louisiana. I'm going to set up my LLC. I'm going to do all this stuff and now own one, right? Because I can see there's going to be cash flow galore out of this thing. So it's a heck of a good deal. So I said, well, before I do that, let me call up a couple of realtors in the area. So I see one that just sold one in the same park, and I call them up and I said, hey, listen, I see you just had one sold in this park. I'm an investor and I'm going to buy this property. And sometimes I do a fix and flip. Sometimes I turn it into a rental. Sometimes I just buy it and sell it as is, depending, right? But I'm going to be buying this and I'm going to be closing soon. And if I do, I might just want to list it. And if I do, what would you list this for me for? I have it under contract for 70,000. He's like, I got a buyer who'd buy this right now for me for 90,000. And I said, well, it's a little bit less than I was thinking, but if I were to buy it as is, what kind of commission would I pay you? He's like, well, he's a friend of mine. So here's what I would do. I'll take a $1,500 commission instead of charging you 6%. And he's a cash buyer. We could close in under 30 days. I said, and he'll buy it as is. He said, well, let me just do a walkthrough with him. I said, the key's underneath the doormat. Go help yourself. Guys, I've never been to this property. The seller sent us some pictures. I'm about to close on it in like a week. He says, a guy did a walkthrough, done deal. He'll take it. I said, cool. I'm closing on this house next week. I buy it for 70,000, but I didn't buy it for 70,000 cash. Guys, I showed my closing statement. It's somewhere on our site. I bought it for $7,000 down. I think like $2,000 in closing costs. I made a couple of payments for their property. I've got 10 grand out of pocket, but I only owe it for 70 plus maybe 73, 72 because of the closing costs. I have into it. I sell it to them for 90. I've got very little closing cost fees selling. I got a $1,500 commission. I'm all of a sudden done going to make probably 15, 16 grand at the end of the day for owning a property for not even 30 days. So for that, we just did a quick, what I call subtail, where I bought the property with creative finance and retailed out of it quickly. Now I could have bought it, paid the $7,000, $10,000 out of pocket, turned that into a rental, cleaned it all out, probably spent $15,000 total, $10,000 for buying it, $5,000 for the clean out, some paint, some other small repairs. And then I could have slowly got that money back. But for me, rather than having to shell out $15,000, we made 16 on that deal. So that's a good win. So when I'm looking at these creative finance deals, I'm looking at monthly cash flow. I'm looking at my cost of acquisition. I'm looking at my time frame. The reason why we didn't keep that deal long enough was because our seller gave us a 7-year term to get them cashed out, which I still would have been fine for 7 years doing that deal, but I saw the opportunity and made it happen. So once again, guys, I really think that with these creative finance deals, because of the market turning, you're going to find more and more sellers are going to be open to hearing what you have to say, especially if you know the right questions to ask and how to ask them, right? So when you have the market pulling back a little bit, the one thing that I'm looking for right now, I'm going to give you guys some clue, sellers who just bought their property in the last year, last 18 months. Somebody who probably, think about what this real estate atmosphere has been like the last 18 months. If you bought a house in the last 18 months, did you probably pay full asking price for it? If you got lucky. If you bought a house in the last year, did you probably pay over asking? Probably, most likely. If you bought a house in the last year, did you probably pay 20, 30, 40, 50? I've heard 100,000. I've heard way higher over asking for the right property. Happens all the time, and it's been happening for years. So think of all these people who have been doing that, who did do that in the last year, in the last 18 months, or maybe their life situation changed, loss of something, job, career, move, whatever it is, death in the family, they cannot afford that payment. They are now going to put that property on the market and they cannot sell it for what they owe. Or if they do sell it, they have to write a big, gigantic check to say goodbye to that property. Because by the time you pay your real estate commissions and closing costs, you might be what they call underwater or upside down. Either way, what that means is you're going to owe more on your house than what it's worth. For me, will I buy those properties? If I could get into that property and take it over for what they owe, it's a beautiful house in a beautiful neighborhood, probably just bought them in the last year, so it's probably in pretty decent shape, right? If I could buy for what they owe on them or pretty darn close and help them with some move out money, cover closing costs, and this is in a position where I could put a renter a rent-to-own buyer, an Airbnb, or a number of different things, and I get cash flow out of that deal, I'm doing those deals galore. And we're doing them left and right. And if you have a hard time finding them, you can go into favehomebuyers.com. We do have them available too. We got great deals. Every one of those deals, like if you guys don't buy, we will end up buying them ourselves. But it's so hard to buy because we find deals everywhere, all across the country. We predominantly focus on Florida, but when sellers reach out to us and they have a great deal in, you name it, we make that deal happen. So we do have some in Colorado. I think that one's sold. We have one in Arizona in a 55 and older community right now. If somebody's looking for something like that. We have one in Port Charlotte, another one that I think is available right now. These are, when we get these under contract, guys, these are within days old. The Port Charlotte one is a sub 2 deal. It's a house built in 1981. It's a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom, 1,256 square feet. Wood frame home. AC, HVAC was in 2018. Newer windows and roof. There's a 3.3% interest rate on the existing loan. So this is why we also love these creative finance deals, these sub 2 deals, is because when I'm buying one of them, we're taking over mortgage at 3.3%. The term on this, guys, is 29 years. So if you're looking for a deal that you're going to get into, the payment's $1,300 a month. And there is a down payment to the seller of $25,000. Here's the good thing, guys. You have the term of 29 years left on this mortgage, and it's yours for the next 29 years. So is this property be worth more than it is right now at 267 in the next 30 years or so? I would guess yes. So, and there's pictures on there, but go to Fave Home Buyers. There's a lot of different properties. If you're ever interested in just taking a look at them, we have our email list you could sign up for to get on there, and you will talk to Courtney, who is my disposition manager. She is awesome. If you haven't already contacted her, please do. But on our site, this is where we're going to put all of our properties, and she's amazing. So if you ever want to talk about one of these, send her a message. Hugo, Colorado, I think is taken. I'm not really too sure. I'd have to find out. But that's definitely a little bit more of a rural up in the mountains property. So we find them all over the place, guys. So once again, Abby, do we have any questions down below? I wanted to see.
Yes, I believe so.
Okay, so Nancy, I see that you are in Philadelphia, but looking for deals in Sarasota. That is not too far from where we are and the Gulf Coast cities. So please make sure you reach out. If you're not on our favehomebuyers.com, please put your email address in there, because that's where we go find a lot of deals, and that's who gets to see them first. Look, we already got somebody in Sarasota, Florida here too, but we've been really primarily hunting for a lot of deals in Florida. And I think the reason why we made a transition to focusing a lot in Florida is we love how quick the turnaround time is here for closings. Texas, the same thing. There's a handful of states, guys, where I'm from in upstate New York, to close a real estate transaction is 60 to 90 days. And to me, that is absolute torture that it takes that long. Where if you're working in Florida, you could close a deal in under 30 days. So a handful of other states are the same way. So that's why we like Georgia, same thing. Louisiana, same way. Any tips for seller financing in upstate New York, whether it's a signing or holding onto a property? So I know upstate New York very well, Carson. Upstate New York, we are buying a deal in Auburn, New York right now, 0% mortgage on it. We should be hopefully closing. I got to do my virtual walkthrough with the seller. I think in a lot of markets, I'm going to give you guys another tip. I'm from upstate New York, where your houses are $150,000. Not all New York is New York City, everybody, in these big, huge buildings and skyscrapers that cost millions of dollars. Most of New York State is farmland and inexpensive properties. The neat thing about when the market really jumped up really high, upstate New York went up a little bit, didn't jump up a lot. But even in 08, when everything really went down in 2009, 10, and 11, like it didn't also go down very much either. It stayed kind of steady-ish. Places like Phoenix, Las Vegas, Florida, where houses appreciated like overnight, tremendous amounts, those were also where you got the biggest pullbacks. So the neat thing about it, Carson, is in upstate New York, anybody who's bought a house, you could even go back the last, say, 2 years, 3 years. because their houses appreciated in the last few years, but not tremendously. The challenge that our team deals with here in Florida is that if you bought a house in Tampa or Sarasota in 2019 for 300,000, that thing's worth 650 right now without doing a thing to it. They just literally went up almost that much. It's insane what happens here. If somebody bought a house in upstate New York for 150 grand in 2019, it might be worth 165 right now. Like, it didn't go up that much. So if somebody recently bought one and they do need to sell, most of the folks that we worked with in upstate New York were relocating out of state. So there are a tremendous amount of people who are relocating out of New York State, but there's also a lot of folks who loved our rent-to-own program. We actually own 585rentown.com, 585 Rent to Own on Facebook. That's our site where we reach out to all the folks looking for our tenant buyers. And we have a huge following, like not huge, but I mean, there's 10,000 people in there. And these are folks who are looking for rent to own properties in upstate New York. So I love the business climate in upstate New York as far as what we do. I hate the eviction laws because they really do make it a real big pain for landlords. So to offset that, if somebody gives me a $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 non-refundable option deposit for one of our properties to move in there and then rent it until they qualify for a mortgage, if they do default, and once in a while they still do, it's not the end of the world because it's non-refundable. You keep their $20,000 and then you resell the house again. Opposed to if it's a regular tenant, they'll just lose their security deposit and they're probably used to it anyways, and they haven't paid you rent in 6 months, so they don't care. So yes, those are the kind of things that we do in upstate New York. I like keeping them there because we have all of our LLCs already set up there, and we do still buy a lot up there. Do you have a virtual for all of these line items? We are working on that now. So line items, Cindy, I'm answering your question right now. So virtual, are we talking more of classes or like the cost of acquisition sheet? Because if you're looking for the cost of acquisition sheet to add up the math, I could have Abby drop that in our group. If you want more training, we definitely have it on creativefinanceplaybook.com. If you want to drop that link to Abby in the comments. We do have a lot of our virtual classes on there, a lot of our virtual live events that we've done where we break into a lot of like processes and how we're doing a lot of these things. Nancy, some counties such as Williamsburg, New Jersey automatically have a tax reassessed when you do a flip. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. There are some places, Nancy, and everybody else listening, that when you buy a property, sometimes they reassess them right away. Sometimes they have a reassessment period every couple of years. And then they go by the price of what you bought it for. Some do, some don't. Every county is different. But if you're going to buy a deal in a certain county, you're going to want to find out what that's going to be like once you do buy it. You don't want to find out after that they're going to reassess it. And the property was assessed for $175,000 and you just bought it for $450,000 and your tax bill more than doubles. And now you're in a tough situation. So thank you for sharing that, Nancy, but spot on. So you definitely need to be careful. Are you using private money to get into the deal or are you using your own money? So Harvey, what we do is actually we use our own money. We fund all of our own deals. We haven't used a private lender ever. And the reason for that is because of our business model, what we've changed into in 2017, when I started learning creative finance in 2016, but in 2017 is when we started really executing everything, where we bought a lot of properties with creative finance. We already had a portfolio of properties that we did the traditional BRRRR, that were rentals. And that summer, we literally flipped every one of them when their leases were up. We told them that we're going to sell the property. So when your lease is up, we're not going to renew it. We gave them plenty of notice to our tenants, but we did say that we're going to offer it as a rent to own, like a lease purchase. And if you do want to buy it, we'll give you first rights. However, it's going to be different than your rental because you're going to have a non-refundable option deposit that's going to go towards the purchase. And it's typically going to be about 10% of the selling price or more. So they all said, no, can't do that. They all moved. So that summer of 2017, which is just crazy, but every single one of those properties we turned over again. These were all nice houses in nice neighborhoods, all single family homes. And we turned them all into lease purchases where we collected. Our lowest one, I think, was 8,000. And I think our highest was 30,000 was a non-refundable option deposit for the highest one. And we had, I think, 6 of those properties. So from that, raising that capital rate there, that was quite a bit. So from doing a lot of these creative finance deals, Most of them are closing costs, 3, 4, 5 grand. And then the cosmetic 5 grandish or less stuff, a couple payments. So we're usually into these deals for under $10,000, especially for the ones that we keep. And then if I'm going to put in a tenant buyer who's going to give me $10, $20, $30,000 of a non-refundable option deposit, that little bit of money of mine that I've used, I've paid that right back. I've got no credit. I've got no banks involved. I don't have any debt in my own personal name. And now I have a cash flowing asset that really cost me nothing to own. Because most of the time I'm profitable within a handful of months. And then everything else after that is just 100% profitable. So therefore, to answer your question, the best, I don't have private money lenders that I use, but I would say if you do find these deals, so like how's the best way for you to do it? Is I always say then team up with somebody who does have money and some experience in this realm. If you don't, so maybe you already do, Harvey. I'm not talking about you specifically, but like for somebody else who maybe doesn't, like I'm new, I've never done this before, but I found a seller who's in this situation, but my cost of acquisition, Joe, because thank you for your worksheet, added up and it's 25 grand. But my cash on cash is going to be a great return because of this, all these reasons. It's a beautiful house in a beautiful neighborhood and the deal makes sense. Like team up with somebody like myself or another investor who's really done a lot of these deals, has HUD statements to prove it like we do. And, we'll help partner with you on that deal and make that happen for you, because sometimes the best way to learn is by being a part of the action and doing it. But a lot of times too, having it all on your shoulders sometimes is overwhelming. So to have somebody partner with you and help you on that is sometimes a good touch. And then once you start making a deal or two, you do assign a couple of these deals yourself. Maybe the first handful of deals you do assign, whether it's a cash deal or assigning a creative finance deal. And once you do that, you will have some capital to be able to start funding your own deals. I'm not saying that, having partners is terrible, but you don't need them. You really don't need them. And if you do a handful of wholesale deals first, maybe have some access to some private cash by having a strategy you can pay it back quickly, you won't need a partner. May I do any creative virtually? So Alex, may I do any creative financing virtually? So 100% of our deals are all virtual. The last time I was on a seller appointment where I went to a seller's house it's been a year. That was our house on Nunda Boulevard. And we closed on that in November last year. So it's been a year since I've been to a seller's house, although I'm going Thursday for one. That's a cash deal anyways. So yes, you can do all these creative finance deals virtually. A lot of these money down, no money down deals, beautiful houses, beautiful neighborhoods. If I do a virtual walkthrough and I never walk through the property, I personally don't care. A lot of people will say, well, what happens if, you go to the property, you come to find out there's a fire-breathing dragon that lives in the basement, you can't get it out of there. Worst case scenario, guys, you could do a deed right back to the previous owner and lose your closing costs, lose any down payment if you did give them one. But most of our deals are no money down, me covering closing costs. I've got a lot of pictures. I've usually sent somebody through the property, a contractor or two in the area. I could pay an inspection report to make sure that I've had somebody professionally walk through it first, right? But do I have to personally walk through it myself? No. Technology is so darn good now between Zoom, phones, texting. I mean, like my iPhone is like last year's model and the pictures are phenomenal. So if even, grandma who could do a Zoom call with you and just kind of just not show up her nose, but kind of show around the room, if you get them to focus the camera outwards, they could do a good enough video and we record them. So either when we record it, that's something that I could show you as one of our buyers who want to buy it. Like, what's the house look like? Well, here's the virtual walkthrough. You don't have to walk through it unless you really want to. But that's how we do that. So yeah, we do them all virtually. What site do you use to collect rents? Ha ha ha, Lou. That's a Jenn job. I think we're still using apartments.com. Don't quote me on that, but I think that's what we still use. My wife does that for now, but we're going to be hiring somebody. So if you want to do that and get paid to do it, let us know. No, I'm kidding. She does that for now, but I think it is apartments.com. But I don't know if she loves it, but that's what we've been using. And it does have some good points to it. And before that, it was something else and it changed. So it's that now. Do you guys partner on multifamily deals? Currently work on calls on duplexes on markets in Atlanta? Yes, we do. Definitely do. Love Atlanta. We got boots on the ground in Atlanta if you're not already there, Andrea. And I'm always looking to get into some deals. Multifamily is are definitely a great niche, because I think what happens is you're dealing with still some mom and pop landlords, and that's what I had with today, opposed to the seasoned landlord who wants 20% down at 10% interest and a 5-year balloon and all these other hostile terms. So yeah, I definitely do. If you I'd love to get on a call and chat about that. Carson, what way did you find most effective for finding creative deal in upstate New York? In upstate New York, we did really well with finding people on Zillow. We did a lot of posting in Facebook groups, just connecting with folks who want to sell their home. Believe it or not, we've made a lot of deals from asking people for referrals on our own Facebook page. Hey guys, you know anybody who wants to sell a home? I'm looking to buy one. I know you sell the market slow right now, but I'm looking to buy a house in the next few weeks. If you know a house that you're looking to sell soon, or if you know somebody who is, I also pay $1,000 referral for any house that I purchase. So if you're looking to sell your home, or you know somebody who is, put me in contact with them and I'll pay you $1,000. I've had to write that $1,000 check a handful of times, guys, to just posting stuff on my own Facebook page, right? So can I ask friends, can I ask family if they know of anybody? Sure. Because anybody likes to be involved with the real estate game without having to really do it. So if I could get a $1,000 check for referring somebody to you, what does that look like to you? I'm like, shit, I'd love to get a $1,000 check. Send it my way. So I like doing that. Crappy yard signs, another great one. We've bought houses, we bought land deals this way, where we bought a piece of land and immediately after we close on it, we sell it with a realtor, and the return on those are fantastic. So when I see a for sale by owner sign, the uglier the sign, the better. The phone number that's kind of wiped away, the person that never answers their phone, never gets back to you when you say you want to call their house, the better. Because that's how they're treating everybody. And if you could be the one that finally breaks through, you could get that deal. And we had one, it was a piece of land in Brockport, New York. We were driving to one of our properties that we just bought on terms in the village of Brockport. We were leaving. We pull up to a light. My wife looks over, sees there's this terrible sign that says for sale by owner. It's a vacant lot in the village of Brockport on Park Avenue. Park Ave, yes. And we got out, got the phone number, called the guy, literally for 6 months. The guy was terrible at answering his phone and never getting back to you. Terrible. 6 months, we finally tracked him down. We make a deal. We buy it for $12,000. We sold that one for, I think it was 26. Just wrote a check for it out of our self-directed IRA. Bought it cash, put it on the market with the realtor, sold that, put the money back into our self-directed Roth IRA without paying any income tax on there. It's a whole other strategy, but we love doing some IRA deals because that money goes back in tax-free. So crappy yard signs work really good as far as finding deals. We found that a couple ways. Facebook Marketplace, you'll find for sale by owners, anywhere where you could connect with folks who have a house for sale. What does a rent-to-own structure look like? Do you give the renter any amount or percentage every month towards their purchase price? We do not trace. They are renting. Rent-to-own looks like they give us a non-refundable option deposit that will be used towards the purchase if they decide to execute that contract. Until then, they are just renting. Every dollar that they give us goes towards their rent. That's it. Now, however, anything they do pay above their rent will get added to their non-refundable option deposit. So we do have a lot of tenants who like to pay $200 or $300 over per month every month. We have some that pay $700, $800 a month over their rent every month. So some of them will have their non-refundable option deposit growing over time, and they like that. But actually, any part of the rent is just rent. And what we do is we typically try to keep their rent around market price to keep it affordable for most people. So when you buy anything, I could sell you $1 million property. Once again, if the payment's $1 a month, right? So it doesn't matter if it was $1 million. So what we try to do is focus on keeping the rent affordable for folks to attract more of a buying pool, and then seeing the best candidate who's got a large non-refundable down payment, who I feel like within the next handful of years or so, or more or less, depending, will be able to qualify for mortgage and buy that property. And if they don't, and they stay in there for a long time, because we have a whole lot to do, like I'm not going to force them. Like they're taking great care of the property. We're making great money. And I'm in no hurry, neither are they. So hey, there we go. So yeah, and every single month they pay and they feel like it's their home already. So they have a pride of ownership. They're not a typical renter for the most part. They really love gardening. They love landscaping. They love having the ability to paint a room in their kids' room, whatever color they want, because it's something they're going to plan on owning down their house, down the road. And they don't have to worry about some landlord kicking them out of their property, saying, I'm selling it. And now you have to move with your family and relocate and all this stuff that could happen, right? You never know when you're a renter. So this kind of gives them a little bit more of a security feeling. And our tenant buyers love that feeling. And it gives us a much secure feeling too, because if somebody just gave you $20,000 to move into your house and they know if they stop paying you, they're going to lose that, I feel more secure too. So this is a mutual win for everybody. And now, guys, because you gave me that win and I feel good, I'm going to give you the same courtesies. You're never going to see me. You're never going to hear from me unless you don't pay my rent. Because when you have a deal with Wells Fargo, do you ever have Wells Fargo come knock on your door? Like, no, they never do. You'll never hear from Wells Fargo unless you don't pay them. Then you'll hear from them all the time. So I treat them the same respect. All right. I treat them with the same respect. I let them know that the only time you'll ever hear from me is if you stop paying me, and then you'll hear from me more than you'll want to, believe me. And you'll hear from a lot of us too, because there's a whole bunch of people be tracking you down like a dog. What is the website you can view your properties? So we have a number of websites. If you are a rent-to-own buyer and you are a tenant buyer looking to rent to own one of our rent-to-own properties, you could go to 585renttoown.com. And if you just want to stalk us there, stalk away, that's a good spot. Same thing on Facebook, 585renttoown.com. So if you just want to see how it's done, that's how we do it. If you are an investor and you want to look at what properties that we are assigning to other investors, or maybe you're looking for one to move into yourself, that is Fave, F-A-V-E, Fave, like your favorite, F-A-V-E, Fave Home Buyers, plural, favehomebuyers.com. You can check them all out on there. And if you aren't a part of our private group, I'm imagining all of you are, but we drop all of our deals right in our group too. Creative Finance Playbook with Jenn and Joe. You'll see Courtney dropping our deals on there all the time. She works on our team. And so part of the reason why we created this group was to share our deals with you guys, share this experience, how we're making the deals. So either you could learn how to get them on your own, or maybe you're just looking to buy one from us. Either way, you want to know about how to do this. And this is what's important. When there is, what about when there's a loan on a property and a loan is not assumable? iPhone, everyone, I don't know, but I'll answer your question, iPhone. That is okay. We're not assuming the mortgage. We are buying it sub to, which basically means we're buying it subject to the underlying debt. We don't contact the bank. I'm not asking them for permission to do it. That's not what we do. So when you buy a property subject to, if you look at on a HUD statement, everybody know what a HUD statement is. If you don't, you're buying a house, it's all on there. HUD statement, if you look up line 203, it even talks about how to buy a property subject to right on there. So I've had an attorney tell me, well, you can't do that. It's against the law. I'm like, well, if it is against the law, they do a great job of explaining how to properly do it on line 203 of the HUD statement. So if you want to review that for me, please, and tell me what your thoughts on there, and let's chat about it. And then, well, come to find out, they just haven't practiced that before, so they don't know much about it. So a lot of times, and I'll be honest with you, in the last week and a half, I've had 2 conversations with attorneys, one in Louisiana, one in Illinois. Both have been doing this for a very, 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 very long time, done tons of transactions between residential and with investors. And the one in Illinois, who we're told knows how to handle this stuff, has really no clue. And she told us that after. And the one in Louisiana was a little similar. So even if they've been an attorney for a long time, that doesn't always mean they know this part of it. So you really want to make sure that you're talking with an attorney, title company who understands these type of transactions. Sometimes the lender has a non-assuming clause. Please advise. Thanks. Yeah. Once again, it's all done with attorneys. The loan stays in their name. We are not assuming it. The loan stays in the seller's name. We are just making the payments. The deed does transfer to us. We are the owner. They know that. We tell them so many times that we're so clear about it that they know. And we also tell them that because of us paying it on time, will also help their credit score stay high. And I can't tell you how many times that we've bought properties from somebody who's been late on their payments. We've got them current, bought the property, and now because of it being late for so long, their credit score was low, and now their credit scores have increased dramatically because of that. So we make sure that we are fully clear on that. So we're not assuming it. Assuming it means that we're taking on that debt personally. We will not take on debt personally. I will not sign for debt. If anybody ever asks me to, I will say no to the deal no matter what it looks like. And my credit score is an 800 and I plan on keeping that way forever. So that's why I do not use credit to buy real estate. Abby link, there's your creative finance link. Okay, what's the best way to investigate risk of a property tax increase after sale? So, Bo, one thing I like to do, so what's the best way to investigate the risk of a property tax increase after the sale? I call the county. I call the county and I talk to somebody there and I explain them the situation. Hey, I'm buying this property. I see it's assessed for this. And I see the tax amount is roughly this. Is that correct? Yes, it is. Now I'm planning on buying the property for this. And I'm going to be buying an attorney as a rental. What can I be expected to have happen in this situation? Am I going to lose any homestead or any star exemptions? When will there be a reassessment? If I buy it for this, roughly would it be reassessed at? What can I expect? Any other surprises or changes? And they usually will do a very good job of telling you all the stuff. So talk to the county tax department. And this is what I do all of the time on my keepers. So I want to know this stuff, especially when you're buying. I bought a lot in New York State, so I understand how that works. But if it's the first time me buying a deal like this in a different state, you really want to find out what that county and state's regulations and laws are. Nancy, yeah, rentalmeterforrentals.com. That's a great place that we check for rentals. They do a pretty good job. We have a little bit of an issue. Once in a while, our properties are pretty rural and Rental Meter will do an okay job. One other trick too, I will say, is one of our students was looking in Rochester, New York, where my old city was, use rentameter.com. And I know my city very, very well. So the difference was you just got to be super careful and know the layout of the land very well. The city of Rochester borders around the suburb towns. There's literally one road where if you're on one side of the road, you're in the city of Rochester and you're in the city of Rochester school district. And that side of the road is like, I can't say a war zone, but you will get robbed and shot, or be able to get all types of illegal activities going on there. You go a half mile, not even up the road, you're in a suburban school district and it feels like you went on the other side of the rainbow. Like you don't know what happened. It's like a completely different world. Rents are completely different. The scene a quarter of a mile away, it's like you cannot believe it. So when Rent-A-Meter is saying that this property was renting for $1,800 a month, I saw that area and I was like, oh, hell no. If you get $1,000 to $1,200 per month in that area, you're going to be in a win. So Rent-A-Meter, I love them. I love Zillow. One thing I always do, I go on Google Maps. I look for apartment complexes, what they're currently renting for in the area. I will also pull up and see if there's any current rentals on Zillow or anything else being currently listed for rent in that area and try to get some comps that way too. But I have seen even, Zillow guys, those estimates aren't always accurate, but definitely do some due diligence when you're finding that because I have found some variances. Alex, may I do creative finance deals virtually? Thanks for the reply. Do you handle tenants also virtually? Yes, you could do creative finance deals virtually. We do. I think I got that earlier. And we handle all of our tenants or tenant buyers. We only have one tenant. We do everything through our tenant buyers. And everything's done virtually. I actually I have not walked into the majority of our real estate we own. I've never even seen them. And I definitely have not seen any of our tenant buyers. They don't even know who I am. I would like to learn more about partnering with you, learning more about doing deals. What's the best place to start your master classes or talking to you personally? Chris, Abby, what we talked about too is a spot for folks to submit deals. Have we had that done on our site yet or got?
That can be uploaded pretty soon. It's almost done.
All right, cool. We'll have a spot to talk about deals, partner and deals. So if you have something you want to submit, Chris, if you want to just chat, send me a message on Facebook or Instagram and we could definitely connect. Still don't get that. Seemed to me I need to be in Still don't get that. Seems to me I need to be in the area. For doing virtually, yeah, some people struggle doing virtually. I'll be honest with you, we were kind of already doing this stuff, a lot of it virtually anyways. And then when COVID happened, that's when I walked away from my job and started doing this full time. And we had no choice to do everything virtually. We had a property that was available for rent to own. This was in March of 2020. And at the time, realtors were not allowed to show real estate because they would lose their real estate license in New York. This was a true thing. Good thing is I'm not a realtor. But COVID was so bad when it first popped off. You think if I even looked at you across the street, we're all going to die. So what we did was we put a lockbox on the door. And when somebody would reach out to us through messaging or Facebook or Craigslist or however they found the property, we'd ask them the questions. If it sounded good, we would have them text over a copy of their driver's license. We would get on a video chat with them when they got to the property, like I was standing right next to them. So I have their license, I see who they are, and then I would give them the code right while they're there. And then they'd let themselves through the house. They'd walk through the house. And then after I'm done, okay, lock the door and change the code, put the key back in the box. Okay. And then do you want the application? They would, or wouldn't, or whatever it was. And then, but I know who was there. I know right when they were there. And we did all virtually. And that really helped us understand that if it's 10 minutes from where I live and I could do it virtually, I could do a property an hour away. So that's what happened. We did one an hour away in Buffalo, New York. And then it turned into 2 or 3 hours away. Then it turned into states away. Then it turned into like, hey, fine, we'll just do them anywhere. Virtually worked. And then when we were doing it on that side of it virtually, we realized buying was equally as easy if I could send boots on the ground there to send me photos and videos, and I could pay for an inspection report so I know what's wrong with the property. I really realized I don't need to go see properties and be boots on the ground. The only time I usually will be is if I'm going to do a rehab, which I hate doing rehabs for. And if I'm on a seller appointment, I feel like being there in person sometimes could get you a little bit more. You'll spot more stuff on a real fixer-upper, the handyman special, but we still don't go to eat most of those either. But sometimes you can negotiate a little bit better deal. I still do believe that. But it's impossible to get to all the places where we are. Do you find a rentometer fairly accurate? Do you use to figure out market rent? Trace, I just kind of went over that part. Hope I touched on it good enough. But rentometer, I still use as an average. I will use Zillow, their rental average. I pull up Google Maps, look for what complexes are renting for in the area, and then kind of blend them all together. I also, too, because we do rent to own, I also figure out if they were to buy this property at what price I'm going to sell it to them for, and they have 10% down and they were to get it at whatever interest rate, like what would their payment be if they were to buy it? Right. So if it's going to be slightly more than that, and they say, well, that's way too high, well, then you're not going to be able to afford to buy this place either. And I probably know that. So I use like a blended source, see what other people are renting for in the area and then go that way. Can you share your rent to own lease? So we have a standard lease agreement that we use for that. And then we have, it's not standard. We did make some changes to it. We can now change it because it used to be no certain breeds, insurance companies didn't like. We still do not allow trampolines, no in-house daycares or anything like that until they're the owner. You want to do that after you own, fine. If there isn't a pool, because like in upstate New York, like I hate pools. Down here in Florida, almost all houses have them. But if they have a pool, like you're not, or if it doesn't have one, you're not allowed to put one in there until it's yours once you do that. So I have a separate lease that just says they're responsible for maintenance repairs. It's a typical lease for whatever state you're in. And then I do have an extra addendum, which is an option rider, which I can share with you guys. I'll put it in the group. And that just says that if you want to execute your contract, like you promise to pay this amount and this is how much time you have. So we could drop that. Sometimes you could look up estimate tax county website based on the purchase price. You are correct, Trace. I always want to verify to make sure if there are any changes, like losing homestead or star. I always want to spend the 10 extra minutes and call, 20 minutes to call just to talk to somebody at the town or county that could verify. I don't want to find out the hard way, and I don't want you finding out the hard way too. But you're right. To get on the website, sometimes they will have something you could kind of get a rough idea. But I really want to have it penciled down so I get it right from the horse's mouth, as they say. All right, cool. I think I got to all the questions. You guys had a bunch of good ones today. I love it. Sorry, I went a little bit over, but I want to make sure we got to all of these. So once again, guys, if you want to learn more about what we do and you want to check out some of our master classes, we do have them, creativefinanceplaybook.com. That's where myself and Jen have a lot of our recorded content where we've specialized on a series of different classes, and we're going to be putting more up there. We just put one up there on our closing calls. For $79, guys, you literally have 2.5 hours of me or Brittany, who's my closing manager, making live deals where we recorded our calls. There's 2.5 hours of it on there. And this is, I think there's 12 different deals on there that we've made where you're listening to us on these calls, talking to sellers, actually how we're structuring deals. Everybody always asks, like, what do these calls sound like? Well, like, we gather them up for you guys and put it out there. So that's on there. We just posted that like a week ago. We have some of our master classes, which I think are fantastic too. Talks about how we get leads and all types of different ways to get leads. Our scripts, we have one based on that too. So there's a lot of great content out there, but I also want to come here for free and just be here with you folks. I love to do this and share what we're currently doing, and how you can do it too. Because honestly, where we were 2.5 years ago, I would never think I could, because I knew it was gonna be a lot of work, but like, we could hit 10 deals again this month, guys. And that's a dream come true, but it's been a lot of work. So what we can accomplish, you certainly can too. I'm not saying we're anything special. We just worked really hard at this for a while, and it's nice. It's finally coming together, and we're able to have a fantastic team that everyone on our team's been with us for a year or so, almost coming up on 2 years, some of them. And we do have a fantastic team. So what we're doing is definitely working. And our students, we have a handful of students. I know I had this question earlier. We do have students. We do enrollment twice a year. We're going to have one coming up probably around right before Christmas time, November-ish. For the next round, it's 6 months. We do one-on-one coaching for 6 months. We meet every week and we go over everything. I mean, they get to come to all of our meetings. We do a lot with our students, but a lot of our students are having tremendous success. But it's also too, it's what you put into it. I mean, I could send somebody to Harvard, and if you don't go there every day and really, really try hard, you're probably not going to love that experience and do well. But for the folks who come and do, they're really doing. And I've had a handful of our students who've already quit their full-time jobs of engineers and attorneys' offices and accountants, and are now living a life full-time at real estate investors. So it's pretty cool. One of them actually is in this room. One of my students, Mike and Jay, walked away from their job a handful of months ago, are doing this full-time. And those two are crushing it. So super proud of them. We had a great meeting with them today, and they just made another deal and got a really nice check. So I'm very happy for them, what they got working. So either way, guys, thank you so much for coming in today. I have to hop off because I have another meeting with our team at 4 o'clock, and I have to call attorneys and do all that types of fun stuff before then. So thank you so much, guys. Next Tuesday, same time, same place. Abby, what are we going to do next Tuesday? We need to do more of these. I got to figure out if it's going to be in more going over more creative finance deals that we've worked on, just like keep going with all the newest deals that we've made, showing us real examples. I think is creating a lot of value. If you guys have any input too, I would love to hear from you. I'd love to hear things that you would like to see, things that you would like to see us share or explain or dive deeper into during this time, so we could spend a lot more time on what you're looking for. But in the meantime, guys, write us in the group if you need anything, and we'll see you next Tuesday. And thank you, Abby. Thank you, everybody, for coming. And thank you for your time today, guys. We'll see you next week.